Hi everyone, welcome back. Section 68 of the Adi Parva, Sambhava Continued. Janmejay said, O Brahman, I have indeed heard from thee this account of the incarnation according to their portions of the gods, the Danavas, the Rakshasas, and also of the Gandharvas and the Apsaras. I, however, again desire to hear of the dynasty of the Kurus from the very beginning. Therefore, O Brahman, speak of this in the presence of all these generate rishis. Vaishampayan said, O exalted one of the Bharata race, the founder of the Paurava line was Dushmata, gifted with great energy, and he was the protector of the earth, bounded by the four seas. And that king had full sway over four quarters of this world. And he was the lord also of various regions in the midst of the sea. And that great oppressor of all foes had sway over the countries even of the Malechas. And during his rule, there were no men of mixed caste, no tillers of the soil, of the land, of itself yielded produce. No workers of mines, for the surface of the earth yielded in abundance, and no sinful men. All were virtuous and did everything from virtuous motives, O tiger amongst men. There was no fear of thieves, O dear one, no fear of famine, no fear of disease, and of all four orders took pleasure in doing their respective duties and never performed religious acts for obtaining fruition of desires. And this subject and his subjects, depending upon him, never entertained any fear. And Parjanya and or Indra poured showers at the proper time, and the produce of the field was always pulpy and juicy. And the earth was full of all kinds of wealth and all kinds of animals. And the Brahmanas were always engaged in their duties, and they were always truthful. And the youthful monarch was endued with wonderful prowess and physical frame, hard as a thunderbolt, so that he could, taking up the mountain Mandara with his forest and bushes, support it on his arms. And he was well skilled in four kinds of encounters with the mace, hurling it at foes at a distance, striking at those that are near, whirling it in the midst of many, and driving the foe before. And he was skilled also in the use of all kinds of weapons and in riding elephants and horses. And in strength he was like unto Vishnu, in splendor like unto the maker of the day, in gravity like unto the ocean, and in patience like unto the earth. And the monarch was loved by all his subjects, and he ruled his contented people virtuously. Section 69. Sambhava Continued. Janmejay said, I desire to hear from thee about the birth and life of the high soul Bharata and the origin of Shakuntala. And O Holy One, I also desire to hear about Dushmanta, that line amongst men, how the hero obtained Shakuntala. It behoveth thee, O knower of the truth, and first of all intelligent men, to tell me everything. Vaishampayan said, once on a time, King Dushmanta of mighty arms, accompanied by a large force, went into the forest. And he took with him hundreds of horses and elephants. And the force that accompanied the monarch was of four kinds: foot soldiers, car warriors, cavalry, and elephants. Heroes armed with swords and darts, and bearing in their hands maces and stout clubs, and surrounded by hundreds of warriors with lances and spears in their hands, the monarch set out on his journey. And with the leonine rows of warriors and the notes of conchs and sound of drums, with the rattle of the car wheels and the shrieks of huge elephants, all mingling with the neighing of horses and clash of weapons of the variously armed attendants in diverse dresses, there arose a deafening tumult while the king was on his march, and ladies gifted with great beauty beheld from the terraces of godly mansions that heroic monarch, the achiever of his own fame. And the ladies saw that he was like unto Shakara, the slayer of his enemies, capable of repulsing the elephants of foes, and they behaved that he was the wielder of the thunderbolt himself. And they said, that is that tiger amongst men who in battle is equal unto the Vasus in prowess. And in consequence of the might of those arms, no foes are left. And saying this, the ladies from affection gratified the monarch by showering flowers on his head, and followed by foremost of Brahmanas, uttering blessings all the way, the king in great gladness of heart went toward the forest, eager for slaying the deer. And many Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras followed the monarch, who was like unto the king of the celestials seated on the back of a proud elephant. The citizens and other classes followed the monarchs for some distance, and they at last refrained from going farther at the command of the king. And the king then ascended his chariot of winged speed, filled the whole earth and even the heavens with the rattle of his chariot wheels. And as he went, he saw around him a forest like unto Nanda itself, the celestial garden. Nandana itself, the celestial garden. And it was full of Vilva, Arka, Kadira, or cashew, Kapitha, the wood apple, and Dhava trees. And he saw that the soil was uneven and scattered over the blocks of stone loosened from the neighboring cliffs. And he saw that it was about without water and without human beings, and lay extended for many yojanas around. It was full of deers and lions and other terrible beasts of prey. The king, Dushmanta, the tiger amongst men, assisted by his followers and the warriors of his train, agitated that forest, killing numerous animals. And Dushmanta, piercing them with his arrows, felled numerous tigers and were within shooting range. And the king wounded many that were too distant, and killed many that were too near with his heavy sword. And that foremost of all wielders of darts killed many by hurling his darts at them. And well conversant with the art of whirling the mace, the king of immeasurable prowess fearlessly wandered over the forest. And the king roamed about, killing the denizens of the wilderness, sometimes with his sword and sometimes by fast descending blows of his mace and heavy clubs. And when the forest was so disturbed by the king possessed of wonderful energy and by the warriors of his train delighting in warlike sport, the lions began to desert it in numbers. And herds of animals, deprived of their leaders, from fear and anxiety, began to utter loud cries as they fled in all directions. And fatigued with running, they began to fall down on all sides, unable to slake their thirst, having reached river beds that were perfectly dry. And many, so failing, were eaten up by hungry warriors, while others were eaten up after having been duly quartered and roasted in fires lit up by them. And many strong elephants, maddened with the wounds they received and alarmed beyond measure, fled with trunks raised on high. And those wild elephants, betraying the usual symptoms of alarm by urinating and ejecting the contents of their stomachs and vomiting blood in large quantities, trampled as they ran many warriors to death. And that forest, which had been full of animals, was by the king with the band of his followers and with sharp weapons, soon made bereft of lions and tigers and other monarchs of the wilderness. Section 70. Sambhava Parv continued. Vaishampayan said, then the king with his followers, having killed thousands of animals, entered another forest with a view to hunting, and attended by a single follower, and fatigued with hunger and thirst, he came upon a large desert in the frontiers of the forest. And having crossed the herbless plain, the king came upon another forest full of retreats of ascetics, beautiful to look at, delightful to the heart in the cool, agreeable breezes. And it was full of trees covered with blossoms, the soil overgrown with the softest and greenest grass, extending for many miles around, and echoing with the sweet notes of winged warblers. And it resounded with the notes of the male kokila and of the shrill kekala. And it was full of magnificent trees with outstretched branches forming a shady canopy overhead. And the bees hovered over flowery creepers all around. And there were beautiful boars in every place. And there was no tree without fruit, none that had pickles on it, none that had no bees swarming around it. And the whole forest resounded with the melody of winged choristers, and it was decked with the flowers of every season. And there were refreshing shades of blossoming trees. Such was it, the delicious and excellent forest that the great bowman entered. And trees with branches beautified with clusters began to wave gently at the soft breeze and rain their flowers over the monarch's head. And the trees, clad in their flowery attires of all colors with sweet throat warbles perched on them, stood there in rows with heads touching the very heavens. And around their branches, hanging down with the weight of flowers, the bees, tempted by the honey, hummed in sweet chorus. And the king, endued with great energy, beholding innumerable spots covered with bowers of creepers decked with clusters of forest, from excess of gladness became very much charmed. And the forest was exceedingly beautiful in consequence of those trees ranged around the flowery branches, twining with each other and looking like so many rainbows for gaudiness and variety of colors. And it was the resort of band of siddhas and charanas, the tribe of Gandharvas and Apsaras and monkeys and kinnaras drunk with delight. Delicious, cool, and fragrant breezes, conveying the fragrance from fresh flowers, blew in all directions as if they had come there to sport with the trees. And the king saw the charming forest gifted with such beauties. And it was situated in a delta of the rivers, and the cluster of high trees standing together lent the place the look of gaudy pole erected to Indira's honor. And in that forest, which was the resort of every cheerful birds, the monarch saw a delightful and charming retreat of ascetics, and there were many trees around it, and the sacred fire was burning within it. And the king worshipped that unrivaled retreat, and he saw seated in it numerous yotis, balakhilas, and other munis. And it was adorned with many chambers containing sacrificial fire. And the flowers dropping from the land had formed a thick carpet spread over the ground. And the spot looked exceedingly beautiful with those tall trees of large trunks. And by it flowed, O king, the sacred and transparent Malini, with every species of waterfowl playing on its bosom. And that stream infused gladness into the hearts of the ascetic who resorted to it for purpose of ablutions. And the king beheld on its banks many innocent animals of the deer species and was exceedingly delighted with all that he saw. And the monarch, the course of whose chariot no foe could obstruct, then entered that asylum which was like unto the region of the celestials, being exceedingly beautiful all over. And the king saw that it stood on the margin of the sacred stream, which was like the mother of all living creatures residing in its vicinage. And on its banks sported the chakravakas, the wave of milk white foam. And there stood also the habitation of the kinnaras, and monkeys and bears stood disported themselves in numbers. And there lived also a holy ascetics engaged in studies and meditation. And there could be seen also elephants and tigers and snakes. And it was on the banks of that stream that the excellent asylum of the illustrious Kashyap stood, offering a home to numerous rishis of great ascetic merit. And beholding that river and also the asylum washed by the river, which was studded with many islands, which possessed banks of so much beauty, an asylum like unto that of the Nara and Narayan, laved by the water of the Ganga. The king resolved to enter into that sacred abode. And the bull that amongst men, desirous of beholding the great rishi of ascetic wealth, the illustrious Kanva and the race of Kashyap, one who possessed every virtue and who, for his splendor, could be gazed at with difficulty, approached the forest resounding with the notes of maddening peacocks, and like unto the gardens of the great Gandharva, Chitraratha himself, and halting his army, consisting of flags, cavalry, infantry, and elephants at the entrance of the forest, the monarch spoke as follows: I shall go to behold the mighty ascetic of Kashyapa's race, one who is without darkness. Stay ye here until my return. With this, we come to an end to this section of Mahabharat. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time, this is your host, Madhulika Rajahan, signing off. Stay healthy always. Narayan Narayan.